How did one of the best NFL wide receivers of all time become one of the most controversial players in NFL history? From being involved in legal trouble to being dropped from multiple teams. This is the story of Antonio Brown. Antonio Brown worked hard and earned himself a scholarship at Central Michigan University. Brown was then drafted by the Pittsburgh Steelers. He was drafted during the 6th round and was the 195th overall pick of the NFL's 2010 draft. There wasn't too much to remember from Brown's rookie season, but in 2011 Brown had a solid year receiving for over 1,000 yards. Over the summer before the 2012 NFL season kicked off, Antonio Brown signed a 5-year contract extension with the Pittsburgh Steelers. From this moment on, this is where Brown reportedly showed signs of destructiveness. Shortly after Brown's contract extension, one day before practice, Brown reportedly got into a shouting match with then Steelers defensive coordinator Dick LeBeau. Brown reportedly ruffled feathers before practice while saying that he was the new face of the franchise and that he shouldn't be touched during practice. Coming into the next practice, former safety Ryan Clark said Brown came in and cussed out Dick LeBeau once again. Clark stated that he almost got into a physical altercation that day with Brown. The Pittsburgh defense was so enraged on how Brown was acting, they wanted full reign to hit Brown during practices. Brown also consistently complained about his lack of involvement in the offense despite catching more passes than any receiver in NFL history over a 6-year period. He also once yelled at quarterback Ben Roethlisberger after Brown failed to continue one of his many consecutive receiving single-game streaks. In 2015, former Pittsburgh tight end Heath Miller, one of the most respected players in franchise history, pulled Brown aside and told him to stop complaining about his lack of targets. Miller, who retired at season's end, sacrificed part of his 2015 salary so the Steelers could give Brown $1 million pay bump that season. Brown appeared to turn a new corner in 2017, after the Steelers rewarded him with yet another contract extension, this time making him the highest paid receiver in NFL history. Brown truly played and acted like an MVP that season, helping the Steelers go 13-3 during the regular season while playing some of the best football of his career. His performance in that year's playoff game against the Jacksonville Jaguars, a game that he played in just weeks after suffering a serious calf injury, was called the greatest performance by a receiver in playoff history by Hall of Fame receiver Michael Irvin. October 9th, 2018. This is when Brown's antics started to become serious. Sure, Brown had been fined before for things like touchdown celebrations, but this time, he was in trouble with the law. On October 9th, 2018, a lawsuit had been filed against Antonio Brown after he allegedly threw furniture off the balcony of his 14th-story apartment in April. Ophir Sternberg was suing Brown for nearly killing his 22-month-old son in a fit of rage. The incident occurred at Brown's home in the state of Florida. Brown called Sunny Isles Beach police at 10:08 a.m. on April 24th and was very agitated. According to the police's incident report, the alleged items stolen included $80,000 and a gun from Brown's home. Apparently when Brown got upset, he started throwing and breaking things in the apartment. He threw and broke a coffee table, glass, and a few other minor objects. He also threw some objects from the balcony into the pool area, causing minor damages as well. Eventually, the officers calmed Brown down, but the damages were already done. The owner of the multi-million-dollar condo Brown leased filed a case against Brown for damages and breaching the apartment agreement. Sternberg is also suing for assault and intentional infliction of emotional distress, adding that Brown acted without regard for human life. This was because one of the objects Brown threw out of his window almost hit Sternberg's 22-month-old toddler, and in the end, Brown committed $80,000 in property damage. Unfortunately for the Steelers, in 2018, things started to get rocky for Antonio Brown. He had some strange reports over the summer, essentially saying that Pittsburgh local media was out to get him. He also tweeted "Trade me" following the team's Week 2 loss against the Kansas City Chiefs before being absent from the following day's mandatory meeting. Mike Tomlin then held him out at Pittsburgh's season finale against the Cincinnati Bengals after Brown properly failed to communicate with the team's officials during the week. Brown left practice on Wednesday and didn't return to the team until Sunday morning. March 10th, 2019. Antonio Brown is traded to the Oakland Raiders for a 2019 third-round draft pick and a 2019 fifth-round draft pick. Brown had been one of the league's most prolific players. He was an All-Pro 4 straight years from 2014 to 2017, and the first player with at least 100 catches and 1,200 yards receiving in 6 straight seasons. His 686 catches and 9,145 yards are the most from any wide receiver in a 6-year span. Brown was looking to continue his success, but now under Derek Carr and the Oakland Raiders. But sadly, as most know, that wouldn't be the case. On August 7th, news broke that Antonio Brown had reportedly been missing training camp due to frostbite from cryotherapy. Antonio Brown then showed up late to training camp in, you guessed it, a hot air balloon. Later in August, news about Brown broke again. This time, it was that Brown filed and lost 2 grievances with the NFL about having to wear a league-mandated helmet rather than the one that he had worn throughout his career. Brown didn't stop there as he continued to keep himself as a hot topic in the NFL media. Brown shared a screenshot of a letter from Raiders general manager Mike Mayock that informed Brown that he'd be fined $14,000 due to an unexcused absence from a walkthrough on August 22nd. It went on to outline that Brown was previously fined $40,000 for missing Raiders preseason training camp on August 18th, and if he continued to miss mandatory team activities, he would be subject to additional fines and discipline. Brown seemed to have beef with the Raiders general manager as he also posted a video of the conversation they were having on Instagram. However, following an apology to the team and then a brief statement of apology to the media on Friday, all signs were good for Antonio Brown to play Monday at the Raiders season opener. That didn't last long though, because shortly after, Antonio Brown tweeted at the Raiders to release him. And just like that, without playing a single game for the Raiders, Antonio Brown was released as a free agent. The reasoning for the latest and last dispute reportedly came from Brown apologizing for his conduct on Wednesday during a confrontation with the general manager Mike Mayock, and then receiving a fine for more than $215,000 for the confrontation after issuing his apology. The fine was for conduct detrimental to the team, which would therefore allow the Raiders to void the guaranteed $30 million in Brown's contract. Essentially, Brown went at it with the Raiders GM, got fined, which allowed the Raiders to drop Antonio Brown without having to pay his $30 million guaranteed in his contract. Brown went on to tweet, "The child who is not embraced by the village will burn it down to feel its warmth." Brown being a free agent didn't last long because not even a day later, Brown signed with the Patriots and Tom Brady. That didn't last long either, as not even 2 weeks later, Brown was released from the New England Patriots. Brown was able to play in one game though, scoring a touchdown and receiving for 56 yards. The New England Patriots released Antonio Brown because the NFL was investigating him for multiple accusations of inappropriate sexual behavior, including rape. Brown denied both accusations through his lawyer. Under investigation by the NFL, Brown took to Twitter and said he's never playing in the NFL again. Not too long after, Brown took back to Twitter going on a rant saying things like F the NFL, but later tweeted out an apology and said that he just misses playing football. On November 21st, 2019, Brown filed 3 counterclaims against Brittany Taylor, who previously accused the wide receiver of several acts of sexual misconduct. In December of 2019, Antonio Brown worked out with the New Orleans Saints, and the Saints said they were impressed, but that was it. Shortly after, Antonio Brown took to Instagram Live to call out the New Orleans Saints, saying them taking him in to work out with them was just a publicity stunt. I'll leave this full clip at the end of the video. On January 23rd of 2020, the unthinkable happens. Brown turned himself into Broadway County, Florida jail and was charged with battery and burglary of an unoccupied conveyance and criminal mischief. It was reported that Brown was not arrested, but considered a suspect in an ongoing investigation that saw his trainer Glenn Holt charged with 1 count of a felony, burglary, and battery. This was not Brown's first incident involving the Hollywood Police Department. He live-streamed a video of himself on Instagram yelling profanities at the police and the mother of his children in front of their children. In addition to the profane language, Brown called the police officers explicit names. The context for this is that his children's mom showed up to get the clothes for the kid. Instead, she found the key to the Bentley and tried to drive off with it even though it had a flat tire. He called the cops. They instead treated him like the criminal and her like the victim, even though she was trespassing and tried to take his car. You can find this full video on YouTube. On January 28, 2020, a Florida judge freed Brown from house arrest, allowing him to travel freely as he awaited trial for attacking the driver of a moving truck. This allowed Brown to have a chance to come back into the NFL. Later in March, The Bucks head coach came out and said that he would never bring Antonio Brown onto the team. On June 12th of 2020, Antonio Brown changed his plea to no contest in the moving truck driver battery case. The judge sentenced Brown to 2 years of probation, and under probation, Brown was able to travel nationwide for work. Then on July 31st of 2020, the NFL announced it had suspended Brown 8 games for multiple violations of the league's personal conduct policy. This included the dispute at his home in January and for sending threatening texts to a woman who had accused him of sexual misconduct. Surprising everyone on October 23rd, Brown reportedly agreed to a 1-year deal with the Buccaneers, his 3rd franchise in the last 15 months. Then continuing to surprise everyone in 2021, Antonio Brown won the Super Bowl with Tom Brady against Patrick Mahomes and the Kansas City Chiefs. And later that spring, re-signed with the Bucs, running it back for another year. Everything seemed to be going well, but late in the season, Antonio Brown can be seen taking off his chest pads, his gloves and shirt and throwing them into the stands, then running off the field mid-game. And surprisingly, Brown wasn't fined at all for this. During the Bucs coach Bruce's post-game, he said that Antonio Brown is no longer a Buc and is no longer with the organization. And just hours after Brown walked off the Jets field, he released a song on his Instagram called Pit Not the Palace. Also post-game, Brown was claiming that he had an ankle injury that was known to the coaching staff and that it inhibited his play. He said that the team injected him with a painkiller to help him play through the pain, but he said he got to a point where he could no longer play. Brown said he was scheduled to undergo surgery to repair his ankle. Antonio Brown then shared on his Instagram text messages allegedly between him and the Bucs coach Bruce, where they discussed the ankle injury and more between the wide receivers and Tom Brady's longtime trainer, Alex. Brown clarified that his dispute with Tampa Bay was not directed at the players, but instead was entirely about the management of the team. Not even 24 hours after running out the Jets field, Antonio Brown was spotted at Madison Square Garden at a Nets game. Antonio Brown then posted this extremely long message about running off the field. Antonio Brown first spoke into a microphone about the drama with the Buccaneers on January 7th of 2022 when he was interviewed on the Full Send podcast. Brown reiterated that he had an ankle injury that kept him from wanting to play. He also went off on Brady, saying that he was on a prove-it contract while Rob Gronkowski, another of Brady's friends, was not. He also said that Brady is championed and his supporting cast often gets left out of the picture. Brown also brushed off his concerns of CTE, saying that he doesn't need anyone questioning his health status. Antonio Brown could also be seen at the Super Bowl with Kanye West in spring of 2022, where the Rams faced off against the Bengals. He also came out and talked about his biggest regret of his career was not being able to watch himself play football. You should read this, it's pretty funny. But sadly, even after being done playing football again, another controversy arose for the ex-wide receiver. Antonio Brown was caught on video shoving his bare buttocks into the face of a stunned woman in an outdoor swimming pool at a swanky Dubai hotel as wide-eyed vacationers watched in shock. Brown was asked to leave the hotel shortly after the incident, according to a hotel staff. The hotel had also received earlier complaints from other guests about Brown's antics. This is all that we know about Antonio Brown, and the question is, what will come next? If you enjoy my content, I'd really appreciate if you like and subscribe. I always make sure to put out high quality content and spend a lot of time on my videos. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in my next video.